There was a pale lemon glow over the eastern mountains when we killed the last coals of our fire and saddled up. Kelly was feeling sharp and twisty, for Kelly was a trail-loving horse who could look over big country longer than any horse I ever knew, except maybe Montana horse. Inside me, there was a patience growing, and I knew I was going to need it. We were riding a trail that could only bring us to trouble because the men we were seeking had friends who would not take lightly to our taking them. But the job was ours to do, and those times a man didn't think too much of consequences, but crossed each bridge as he came to it. It was utterly still in this, the last hours before dawn. All was quiet. Even with my coat on, the sharp chills struck through and I shivered. There was a bad taste in my mouth, and I hated the stubble on my jaws. I'd gotten used to shaving, living in town, and being an officer. It spoiled a man. Even in the vague light, we could see the lighter trail of pushed-down grass where the riders had ridden ahead of us. Suddenly, the trail dipped into a hollow in trees, and we found their camp from the night before. They were confident, we could see that, for they'd taken only the usual normal precautions in hiding their camp, and they hadn't made any effort to conceal that they'd been there. We took our time, for there's much that could be learned from men at such time, and to seek out a trail, it is well to know the manner of the men that you seek after. If Cap Rountree and me were to fetch these men, we'd have to follow them a far bit. They ate well. They had bought grub with them, and there was plenty of it. At least a couple of them were drinking, for we found a bottle near the edge of camp. It looked like whoever was drinking it didn't want the others to know, for the bottle had been covered over with leaves. "Fresh bottle," I said to Cap, and handed it to him. He sniffed it thoughtfully. "Smells like good whiskey. Not none of this here Indian whiskey. They don't want for anything. This outfit is traveling mighty plush." Cap studied me carefully. "You ain't in no hurry. They finish their job. They'll want their pay. I want the man who pays them." "You figured out who to be?" "No. All I want is for these men to take me there. Twice before they tried to kill Juan, and now they got him. I'm thinking they won't stop there, and the only way to stop it is to get the man who pays the money." As I was talking, a picture suddenly came to mind. It was Fetterson passing out gold to that renegade, Paisana. It was a thing to be remembered. "Bearing west," Cap said suddenly. "I think they've taken a notion." "Trace Rithos?" "My guess," Cap considered it. "That drinking man now, supposing he's run out of whiskey. The way I figure it, he's a man who likes his bottle, and whoever is bossing the bunch has kept him off it as much as possible. Drinking man now, he gets mighty canny about hiding his stuff. He figures he's got folks fooled. Trouble is, it becomes mighty obvious to everybody but the one drinking. They may believe that because the job's finished, they can have a drink, and Trace Ritos is the closest place. I guess it's about an easy 2-hour ride from here." I looked ahead, searching out the way the riders had gone. They'd taken themselves a notion, all right. Trace Ritos it is. Nevertheless, we kept a close watch on the trail. Neither of us had a good feeling about it. A man living in wild country develops a sense of the rightness of things, and he becomes like an animal in sensing when all is not well. So far, it had been easy, but I was riding rifle in hand now and ready for trouble. Believe me, I wanted that Henry where I could use it. We had 7 tough men ahead of us, men who had killed and who did not wish to be caught. I believe we had them fooled, for they would expect to be followed by a posse, but only a fool depends on a feeling like that. Against such men, you never ride easy in the saddle. You make your plans, you figure things out, and then you're careful. I never knew a really brave man yet who was reckless, nor did I ever knew a real fighting man who was reckless. Maybe because the reckless ones were all dead. Cap drew up. "I think I'll have a smoke," he said. Cap got down from his saddle, keeping his rifle in hand. He drew his horse back under the trees, out of sight, and I did likewise. Only one fault with Kelly. That big red horse stood out like a forest fire in the green country. We sat there studying the country around, but doing no talking, until Cap smoked his pipe out. Meanwhile, both of us had been a long bench far above the trail that led in the directions of Tres Ritos. "We might ride along there," I suggested. "I'm spooky about that trail ahead. If they turn off, we'll lose them. We can come back and pick up the trail." We started off at an easy lope, going up through the trees, cutting back around some rocks. We'd gone about a mile when Cap pointed with his rifle. Down the hill, not far off the trail, we could see some horses tied to trees. One of them was a dark roan that had a familiar look. Reminded me of horse I'd seen Paisano riding, and Paisano had taken money from Fetterson. The trail might take us somewhere at that. We dusted the trail into Tres Ritos shy of sundown. We had taken our own time scouting around and getting the country in our minds. We headed for the livery stable. The sleepy hostler was sitting on the ground with his back to the wall. He had a red headband and looked like a Navajo. He took our horses, and we watched him stall and them and put corn in the box. Cap walked down between the rows and stalls and said, "Nobody here. We beat him to town." The barkeep in the saloon was an unwashed half-breed with a scar over his left eye, like somebody had clouded him with an axe. We asked for coffee, and he turned and yelled something at the back door, and the girl his yell brought over was Tina Fernandez. She knew me all right. All those Santa Fe women knew me. Only she didn't make out like she knew me. She was neat as a new pin, and she bought a pot of coffee and 2 cups, and she poured the coffee and whispered something that sounded like, "See you, Dado," a word meaning we should be careful. We ran our coffee and ate some chili and beans with tortillas, and I watched the kitchen door, and Cap watched the street. The grub was good, the coffee better, so we had another cup. Behind the corral, she whispered, "After dark." Cap chewed his gray mustache and looked at me out of those old, wise, hard eyes. "You mixing pleasure with business? This is business." We finished our coffee and got up, and I paid the bartender while Cap studied the street outside. The bartender looked at my face very carefully, and then he said, "Do I know you?" "If you do," I said, "you're going to develop a mighty bad memory." The street was empty. Not even a stray dog appeared. Had we guessed wrong? Had they gone round to Tres Ritos? Or were they now waiting for us? Standing there in quiet of early evening, I had a dry mouth and could feel my heart beating big inside of me. Time to time, I'd seen a few men shot and had no idea to go out that way if I could avoid it. We could hear them coming to town about an hour later. Chances are they grew tired of waiting for us, if that was what they were doing. They came down the street, strung out like Indians on the trail, and from where we lay in the loft over the livery stable, we could not see them, but we could hear their horses. They rode directly into the saloon and got down there, talking very little. As we had ridden into Tres Ritos by a back trail, they would have seen no tracks, so unless they were told by the bartender, they were not likely to realize we were around. Lying there in the hay, listening out of the back of my mind for any noise that would warn us that they were coming our way. I was not thinking of them, but Orrin, and Laura, Tom Sunday, and Drew, and myself. And there was a lot to think about. Jonathan Pritz would not be talking to Tom Sunday unless there was a shady side to his talk. For Jonathan was a man who did nothing by accident. I knew Tom had no use for a man. But as far back as the night Jonathan had sent for us in Santa Fe, there had been a streak of compromise in Tom. He had hesitated that night, recognizing, I think, that Jonathan was a man who was going to be a power. What was Jonathan Pritz up to? The thought stayed with me, and I worried it like a dog at a bone, trying to figure it out. Of one thing I was sure, it promised no good for us. Cap sat up finally, took out his pipe. "You're restless, boy." "I don't like this. You got it to do. A man wants peace in the country. He has to go straight to the heart of things." He smoked in silence for a few minutes. "Time to time, I've come across a few men like Pritz. Once set on a trail, they can't see anything but that. And the more they balk, the stiffer they get." He paused a moment. "As he gets older, he gets meaner. He wants what he's after, and he knows time is short." The loft smelled of fresh hay and of the horses below in their stalls. The sound of their eating was a comfortable sound and a good sleeping sound, but I could not sleep, tired as I was. If I was to do anything with my life, it had to be now, and when this trail had been followed to the end, I was going to quit my job, marry Drew, settle down to build something. We'd never rightly had a real home for my youngsters, and I wanted one. I wanted a place they could grow up, where they could put down roots. I wanted a place they'd be proud to come back to, which they could always call home, no matter how far they went or what happened. Getting up, I brushed off the hay, hitched my gun belt into position, and started for the ladder. "You be careful." I'm a careful man by nature. At the back of the corral, I squatted on my heels against a corral post and waited. Time dragged, and then I heard a soft rustle of feet in the grass and saw a shadow near me and smelled a faint touch of woman. "You all right?" It was scarcely a whisper, but she came to me, and I stood up, keeping myself in line, the corral post at the corner. "They are gone," Tina said. "What?" "They are gone," she repeated. "I was afraid for you." She explained that there had been 4 horses for them, hidden in the woods back of the saloon, and while they were inside drinking, their saddles had been switched, and then they had come out one by one and gone off into the woods. "They fooled us, huh? Hornswoggled us." "The other one is there. He is upstairs, but I think he will go in the morning." "Who?" "The man who gave them the money. The blonde man." "Fetterson. It could be." "You saw the money paid?" "Yes, Ty. With my own 2 eyes I saw it. They were paid much. The balance," he said. "Tina, they killed Juan Torres. Did you know him?" Yes, I knew him." "In court, Tina, would you testify against them? Would you tell you saw money paid? It would be dangerous for you." "I will testify. I'm not afraid." She stood very still in the darkness. "Ty, I know you're in love with Senorita Alvarado, but could you help me? Could you help me to go away from here? This man, the one you talked to, he is my, how do you call it? He married my mother, your stepfather." "Yes, and my mother is dead, and he keeps me here, and I work. Someday I'll be old. I wish now to go to Santa Fe again, but he will not let me." "Yeah, you'll go. I promise it." The men had gone, and we had not seen them, but she told me one had been Paisano. Only one other she knew, a stocky, very tough man named Jim Dwyer. He had been among those at Pawnee Rock, but Fetterson was here, and he was the one I wanted most. We slept a little, and shy of daybreak, we rolled out and brushed off the hay. I felt sticky and dirty and wanted a bath and a shave in the worst way, but I checked my gun, and we walked down to the hotel. There was a light in the kitchen, and we shoved open the back door. The bartender was there in his undershirt and pants and sock feet. There was the tumble-dry, dirty bedding where he had slept, some scattered boots, dirty rocks, and some coats hung on the wall. On one nail a gun belt hung. I turned the cylinder and shucked out the shells while the bartender watched grimly. "What's all this about?" Turning him around, we walked through the dark hall with the lantern in Cap's hand to throw a vague light ahead. Which room is he in? The bartender just looked at me, and Cap, winking at me, said, "Shall I do it here, or should we take him out back where they won't find the body so soon?" The bartender's feet shifted. "No, look," he protested. "I ain't done nothing." "He'd be in the way," I said thoughtfully, "and he's no account to us. We might as well take him out back." Cap looked mean enough to do it, and folks always figured, after looking at me, that killing would be easier for me than smiling. Wait a minute. He ain't nothing to me. He's in room 6 upstairs." Looking at him, I said, "Cap, you keep him here." And then looking at the bartender, I said, "You know something? That had better be the right room." Up the stairs I went, tiptoeing each step, and at the top, shielding the lantern with my coat, I walked down the hall and opened the door to room 6. His eyes opened when I came through the door, but the light was in his eyes when I suddenly unveiled the lantern, and his gun was on the table alongside the bed. He started to reach for it, and I said, "Go ahead, Fetterson. You pick it up, and I can kill you." His hand hung and suspended above the gun, and slowly he withdrew it. He sat up in the bed, a big, raw-boned man with a shock of rumpled blonde hair and his hard-boned, wedgie-like face. There was nothing soft about his eyes. "Sackett? I might have expected it would be you." Careful to make no mistakes, he reached for his makings and began to build a smoke. "What do you want?" "It's a murder charge, Fet. If you have a good lawyer, you might beat it, but you make a wrong move and nothing will beat what I give you." He struck a match and lit up. "All right, I'm no Reed Carney, and if I'd had a chance, I'd try shooting it out, but if the gun stuck in the holster, I'd be a dead man." "You'd never get a hand on it, Fet." "You taking me in?" "Uh-huh. Get your clothes." He took his time dressing, and I didn't hurry him. I figured if I gave him time, he would decide it was best to ride along and go to jail. For with Pritz to back him, there was small chance he would ever come to trial. My case was mighty light on evidence, largely on what Tina could tell us and what I had seen myself, which was little enough. When he was dressed, he walked ahead of me down the hall to where Cap was waiting with a gun on the bartender. We gathered up Fetterson's horse and started back to town. I wasn't through with that crowd. I trailed, but they would have to wait. Our return trip took us a mighty little time because I was edgy about being on the trail, knowing that the bartender might get word to Fetterson's crowd. By noon the next day, we had him behind bars in Mora, and the town was boiling. Fetterson stood with his hands on his bars. "I won't be here long," he said. "I had nothing to do with this." "You paid them off, Fetterson. You paid Paisano in advance earlier." There was a tie in his eyelid, that little jump of the lid that I noticed long ago in Abilene when he'd realized they were boxed and could do nothing without being killed. "You take it easy," I said, "because by this time this case comes to court, I'll have enough to hang you." He laughed, and it was a hard, contemptuous laugh. "You'll never see the day," he said. "This is a put-up job." When I walked outside the sunlight, Jonathan Pritz was getting down from his buckboard. One thing I could say for Jonathan: he moved fast.